You and your partner are arguing about what happened during last week's dinner with friends. You clearly remember them interrupting you repeatedly. They insist they were just trying to participate in the conversation. Both of you are completely sincere. Neither is lying. So what's going on? Your brain didn't record that dinner like a video camera. Instead, it actively constructed your experience based on your mood, expectations, and past relationship patterns. Their brain did the same thing, but created a different version of events. You're not arguing about what happened, you're arguing about two different mental reconstructions. This might sound far-fetched, but it explains a puzzle that has frustrated humans for centuries. Why intelligent, well-meaning people can witness the same events and come away with completely different stories. The answer lies in how our brains actually work, which is very different from how we think they work. In the early 1900s, a Spanish-American philosopher named George Santayana figured this out decades before neuroscientists could prove it. His insights can help you understand why people disagree so fundamentally, and more importantly, how to communicate more effectively once you know what's really happening. How your brain builds your reality. Here's what actually happens when you see something. Light waves hit your eyes, but your brain doesn't just passively receive this information. Instead, it takes this raw data and constructs a visual experience based on what it expects to see. Your brain fills in massive gaps in your vision. You have a blind spot where your optic nerve connects, but you never notice it because your brain seamlessly fills it in. You can only see clearly in a tiny area at the center of your vision, but your brain creates the illusion that you see everything in sharp focus. The same construction process happens with everything you experience. Your brain doesn't just receive sounds, it interprets them. It doesn't just detect physical sensations, it creates meaningful experiences from them. George Santayana, who taught at Harvard alongside the famous psychologist William James, called this the difference between existence and essence. Existence is what's actually out there in the physical world. Essence is what your consciousness creates when it encounters that physical stuff. When you look at a red apple, the redness doesn't exist in the apple. It exists in your brain's response to certain wavelengths of light. The sweetness you taste doesn't exist in the apple. It's your brain's interpretation of certain chemical compounds. This explains something you've probably experienced: why the same song can sound beautiful or annoying depending on your mood, or why food tastes different when you're stressed versus relaxed. The physical sound waves and chemical compounds are identical, but your brain constructs different experiences from them. Next time you're in a familiar room, pay attention to what you actually see versus what you think you see. You'll notice your eyes are constantly moving, and most of your visual field is actually quite blurry. Your brain is working hard to create the experience of clear, stable vision. Why memory isn't a recording? This construction process becomes even more obvious with memory. Most people think memory works like a filing cabinet. You store experiences and retrieve them later. But psychologist Elizabeth Loftus discovered something disturbing. Memory is reconstructed every time you access it. In her famous experiment, Loftus showed people footage of car accidents. When she asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? People estimated higher speeds than when she asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other, the cars going when they contacted each other. More remarkably, a week later, people who heard the word smashed were twice as likely to report seeing broken glass in the video, even though there was no broken glass in the original footage. A single word had altered their memory of what they witnessed. This happens because your brain doesn't store complete, accurate records of events. Instead, it stores fragments and reconstructs memories by filling in gaps with current expectations, emotions, and beliefs. Think about your most vivid childhood memory. That memory has been reconstructed dozens of times, each reconstruction influenced by your current understanding, recent experiences, and emotional state. It's probably quite different from what actually happened, even though it feels completely real. This isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. Your brain prioritizes useful information over accurate information. A perfectly accurate memory system would be slow and overwhelming. Instead, your brain creates simplified, actionable versions of events that help you navigate similar situations in the future. Pick a recent conversation you had with someone important to you. Write down your version of what was said. Then ask them to do the same. Compare notes. You'll likely be surprised by the differences, even for conversations that happened just days ago. When different realities collide, once you understand that everyone is living in their own constructed reality, human conflict starts making more sense. People aren't just interpreting the same facts differently, they're literally experiencing different realities. Psychologist Dan Kahan demonstrated this with a clever experiment. He showed people identical video footage of a political demonstration. Half the participants were told it was anti-abortion protesters outside a clinic. The other half were told it was protesters opposing military recruitment policies. People with conservative views who thought they were watching anti-abortion protesters saw peaceful, legitimate protest. Conservatives who thought they were watching anti-military protesters saw threatening, disruptive behavior. Liberals showed the opposite pattern, same footage, completely different perceptions based on their existing beliefs. This happens in your daily life more than you realize. When your teenager slams their bedroom door, are they being disrespectful or just closing it firmly? When your coworker doesn't respond to your email immediately, are they being rude or just busy? Your brain constructs these interpretations automatically, and they feel like objective facts. In relationships, this creates what therapists call competing narratives. You and your partner don't just remember events differently, you experience them differently in real time. Your brain is constantly filtering and interpreting their words, tone, and actions through your own expectations and past experiences. Next time you feel strongly that someone is being unreasonable, pause and ask yourself, what would this look like if I gave them the most generous interpretation possible? You might be surprised how different the situation appears when you consciously consider alternative constructions. Working with reality construction. Understanding how reality construction works doesn't mean you can't trust your perceptions. It means you can be smarter about how you use them. First, recognize that your strongest reactions often signal construction in action. When something seems obviously true or false, that's usually your brain fitting new information into existing patterns. The more certain you feel, the more likely your brain is filling in gaps with assumptions. Second, get curious about other people's constructions instead of trying to convince them yours is correct. When someone sees a situation very differently than you do, they're not necessarily wrong or irrational. They're working with a different constructed reality. Instead of saying, "That's not what happened," try, "Help me understand how you experience that." Instead of, "You're overreacting," try, "I see this differently. Can you help me understand your perspective?" Third, pay attention to how your emotional state influences your perceptions. When you're stressed, anxious, or excited, your brain constructs reality differently. Decisions and judgments made in these states often look questionable later when your emotional state has changed. Finally, remember that some constructions are more useful than others. The goal isn't to doubt everything, but to hold your constructions lightly enough that you can adjust them when needed. For one day, preface your strong opinions with, "The way I'm constructing this situation," or "From my perspective." Notice how this small change affects your conversations and your own thinking. The freedom in understanding. Santayana famously wrote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." But he could have equally said, those who don't understand how they construct their present are condemned to be controlled by it. Once you recognize that your brain is constantly constructing your reality, you gain something valuable: choice. You can't control what happens to you, but you have more influence over how you experience what happens than you might think. This doesn't mean you can just think positively and change everything. Your brain's construction process is largely unconscious and automatic, but awareness creates possibilities. When you notice yourself having a strong reaction, you can pause and ask, how else might I construct this situation? The people who understand reality construction tend to be better at relationships, more effective in conflicts, and more adaptable when circumstances change. They're not more enlightened, they just have a more accurate understanding of how human perception works. Your brain will keep constructing your reality whether you understand the process or not. The question is whether you want to be a conscious participant in that construction or continue believing that your particular version of reality is simply the truth. The choice, as they say, is yours, or rather, it's your brain's construction of a choice, but the practical effect is the same.